Before we get to the episode, we want you, dear listener, to ask yourself a question. What have you done these past 2 years? You know, the pandemic hit us all really hard. What have you really done other than perfect that matzo ball soup recipe of yours? Nothing. Now, we all want to add purpose and meaning to our life, and we have the way to really make your dreams come true. If you're listening, you're likely interested in Israel with hopes of traveling here soon. Well, lucky for you, we've got the scoop on Matza Israel Journey. With an amazing range of life-changing opportunities in Israel, Matza has many programs. They've got gap year programs, academics, internships, volunteering, and careers. The pandemic didn't stop them either, promoting options to study remotely while living in Israel. You don't have to be fluent in Hebrew or break your bank account. They even supply partial funding so you can make a positive impact on the world. You can fuel your passion and you can make your travel dreams a reality. Go to matzaisrael.org and find out more. This is Eitan Weinstein.
And I'm Naor Menninger, and you're listening to Two Nice Jewish Boys.
In collaboration with Australian Jewish News, check them out at ajn.timesofisrael.com. Also in collaboration with Arutz Sheva, israelnationalnews.com. During the week of Passover in 2002, a young Israeli Arab walked into the Matza restaurant in Haifa and blew himself up, killing 16 Israelis and wounding many more. The terrorist was the son of a Palestinian from Jenin who was married to an Israeli-Palestinian woman from northern Israel. This week, the Knesset is scheduled to vote on one of the most impactful laws legislated in recent years, a law that could breach the very concept of what it means to be an Israeli, the Citizenship Bill. This law is so controversial that it threatens to dismantle the coalition itself. Included in the law is the fundamental question of how a non-Israeli Palestinian may become a citizen of the State of Israel. One of the versions of this law to be voted on was proposed by our guest today, Knesset member Simcha Rothman. Simcha Rothman recently joined the Knesset as a part of the religious Zionist party led by Bezalel Smotrich. He is a lawyer and the co-founder of the Movement for Governability and Democracy, an NGO, which advocates for returning power from the judicial to the legislative branch. His book, The Supreme Court Faction, or the Supreme Court Party, depicts how judges, prosecutors, and bureaucrats have stolen power away from the democratically elected representatives. We are thrilled to be joined today by MK Simcha Rothman to talk about his proposal for the citizenship law, the judicial system in Israel, and much more, just not the Haredi parties.
Yeah.
Because that will take us into a 3-hour conversation, which we would love to have, but we'll have to wait for another time. So please, where do we start? How is the coalition going to make it past this week?
I don't know how to answer on behalf of the coalition, but you said in the intro it's a controversial law. It's actually not a controversial law, and it's actually not even a right-wing law. It's left-wing law. The idea behind the citizenship law needs to take us back not only to the attack in Matza restaurant that you mentioned, but to the years after the Oslo Accords. The years after the Oslo Accords, the gates for the Palestinian, quote-unquote, right of return were open. And they used them. The Palestinians used them. And in a very short period of time, many Palestinian Arabs living in Judea and Samaria, married Israeli Arabs, got their citizenship, full citizenship, and it went in like a transmission cycle. Mm-hmm. One guy marries a woman from Judea and Samaria, gives their citizenship. They get divorced. He married another one. Sometimes married few at the same time. If he's a Bedouin in the Negev. and gave them citizenship. And
The R was very high. The R.
Yes.
The Mekadem Adbaka.
Yes.
So this is the mid 90s, and we're talking tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands?
It was reaching very fast to tens of thousands every year, getting citizenship. And of course there was besides the demographic danger, there was the security questions. And the security questions raised not only that, okay, who will you marry, because the major prize for the Hamas, for the terrorist organization, was to get someone just immediately after he gets his citizenship. His ties, his family ties, his social ties are still in Judea and Samaria, in the terrorist city, or in Gaza. And then they will recruit him after he got the citizenship. So even the pre-screening wouldn't help, because you would pre-screen someone before you give him the citizenship. He will get the citizenship, and then he will get recruited by the terrorist organizations. So to stop that, or to minimize that, the Knesset passed the citizenship law
2003.
in 2003.
Before that, it was chaos, basically?
Yes.
That's weird. You would have thought
it was
that
10 years of chaos, because until 1993, until the Oslo Accords, until 1995 even, it wasn't even an option. They wouldn't let you get because it was because of the security reasons. The normalization, we as the Palestinian Authority brought the problem, and 2002, 2003,
we paid in high interest,
and we found this solution. Now, this solution was
it was a band-aid, right?
It was a band-aid, and the band-aid even got even worse during the times that passed since 2002 to 2003, because of the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court, almost every time this issue came to the Supreme Court, it was a split court. It was on almost canceling this citizenship law. It was 5-6, 6-7. It was always a split court.
Because it wasn't just a regular law, it was a law that it's called Horat Shah in Hebrew, which means that every year it expires and you need to renew it. So it's
like an executive order. Kind of,
not exactly,
right?
But because it passed by the Knesset, it passed by the Knesset, but to make it continue for another year, the government decides and the Knesset approves. It's not exactly executive order.
But it's a lesser law than
but they did it as an Horat Shah, as a time with an expiration date, just to make it more immune to the Supreme Court. Meaning, we know it's a bad law, the Knesset said to the Supreme Court. We know that you want to cancel it.
It's temporary.
And we are checking every year if it's still necessary.
If peace is broken.
So if everything is okay, we will cancel it ourselves. You don't need to intervene. And that was supposed to make the court less likely to intervene.
But you said this isn't controversial. But the truth, I mean, the reason the Supreme Court knocked it down is because the Supreme Court is representative, right, of this elite, progressive, first Israel, as Gadi Taub calls them, right, the Israel Rishona, and they are represented in the Knesset by, people in the coalition right now, the left-wing parties like Meretz and Avoda. So there is some controversy here.
Yes and no. Meaning, the Supreme Court, was split court, and at the end, the Supreme Court allowed it. It did not cancel the law. But in the Knesset, it was a consensus. Besides Meretz, which is a fringe left-wing party, and the Arab parties, of course, but all the Jewish parties, basically, even the Avoda, were for it, always voted for it. It was you can say pretty sure that 100 Out of 120 Knesset members, you can easily find 100 Knesset members that will support this law. And it's true. That's the case. If count out current coalition politics, we're talking about law since 2003. So the long term, you can find 100 Knesset members that will support this law. What happened now? So what's new? So why did you object? That's the questions that we get all the time. Okay, so if it's a non-controversial law and it was passed over and over time and again since 2003, why did you object and why didn't you pass it this time?
People don't understand this point because a few months ago, after the new government was formed and there's a new Knesset now, again, the expiration date came, but this time the coalition and Shaked, who's the Minister of Interior in charge of this issue. Supposedly right-wing, it's debatable, but she wanted to extend by another year, right? Like you always did.
And we said no. The opposition said no. And
she doesn't have in the coalition, because the coalition is with an Arab party and with Meretz party, she doesn't have the majority.
She didn't have the majority. She almost had the majority. Yeah. It was one vote difference. She almost got, and she even convinced Meretz and Ram to support it, the extension for less than a year, and we'll talk about it maybe later. But we objected, and people say, "Oh, well, how did you object to this kind of law?" The answer is very simple. This law was never planned when you made this law that you will have a government and a coalition that wants to get people in. It allowed for the government to stop people from coming in, but it did not forbid them from bringing people in. So it told the government, you don't have to give citizenship and residency to people that are married to Israeli citizens if they're coming from Judea and Samaria. You do have to, according to Israeli law, give citizenship or residency to people that are marrying people from Ukraine or people coming from Sweden. You do have to give them citizenship at the end of the day. It can take time, but you have to give them. You don't have to give residency to people coming from Judea and Samaria. And the premise was, you never want really to give. So we just say in the law that you don't have to give, so the court cannot make you give citizenship.
So what changed now? I don't understand.
No one ever imagined that there will be a coalition, that the major party in the coalition wants to give citizenship and residency to...
You're talking about Ram.
Talking about Ram
party.
And Meretz,
yeah.
Wants to give citizenship and residency to people who are marrying people from Judea and Samaria.
But you just said they were willing to vote.
They were willing to vote because they got promises from Ayelet Shaked that they will get thousands of new approvals.
Right, because she can actually approve.
She can actually give them.
Because she's the minister responsible.
She's the minister. So we had to draft a new law, a new bill, and say, you don't have to give, but you also can't give more than was ever given. So if you'll take the average of 2017, 2018, 2019, that's what you can give in 2021.
Which is what? Few hundreds, few thousands?
No, like depends. There are certain kinds of approvals. There are certain. There are few separate levels. So which on every level there is a different number. So it's a little bit complicated, but it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
We're for status quo.
But the critique against you was that what you just said is not relevant, because if you if you vote with you say that if you were to vote with
if the law would have passed,
then Shaked
would be able to give.
She would have the law, and she would
have the law, so she wouldn't need us anymore.
Yeah.
And she would be able to give to Ram and Meretz whatever they wanted to.
But another thing is missing in the story, and that's what happens if there is no law Nobody
The
can.
Supreme Court
Yeah.
can make Shaked give citizenship. And actually, that's what's happening now, not citizenship, but residency. That's what's happening as we speak, because the law gave, the Supreme Court gave an extension to Ayelet Shaked until February 1st. And this time has passed, and she didn't pass the law with us. So now she has to start giving new approvals.
Just to understand, on a table of a minister of internal affairs in Israel, probably it can get to thousands and tens of thousands even
tens of thousands, no problem.
of requests.
So she has to check them. Currently, she
Cumbersome.
has to check them one by one. And because there is no law, she can't say, oh, we can't give it to you. She has to check them one by one and give or not give to each and everyone, opening herself to a situation where a lot of appeals are brought against her decisions.
It's a huge headache.
It's a huge headache. But if she comes to us and say, oh, let's pass the law together, and there will be a cap that it's based on status quo, there will be a cap, and we will help her pass the law, then she loses the headache, and she's getting the law that she wants to pass.
But she loses the coalition. Apparently. Maybe. Yes, maybe.
Hopefully.
Yeah, hopefully for you.
For me, hopefully. For her,
Yeah.
sadly. Yes, that's the dilemma. And I think this law basically showed this, everything that we just said, showed why this coalition is an abomination. You can't really have, in a country like Israel, you can't have a coalition with a party that does not want you here, that are a terror-supporting party of Ram. You can't have a government with them. I'm not talking now about Meretz, because Meretz is a different story, but they're also very problematic because they're very extreme left. But with Ram, you can't really do it, because almost by definition, in the Knesset plenum, one time Mansour Abbas, the head of Ram, was trying to embarrass me, and said, I voted for the citizenship law, and you didn't. So who is right-wing here? So I told him, you don't understand. By definition, every citizenship law that you will vote for, I have to vote against.
Yeah.
And every Zionist person has to vote against, because it means we are getting the Palestinian right of return you get it on a silver platter.
So there's another problem, though, that's baked into the cake here, which is, you mentioned before, why not just legislate a law that doesn't allow to make Palestinians from the Judea and Samaria area Israeli citizens by law,
no matter what,
with certain extenuating circumstances,
so
maybe 1 or 2 a year.
So
I mean, I'm assuming that in the United States, you can't become a citizen if you're from North Korea, or I don't know, unless there's maybe an exception.
I don't know exactly what the law in the U.S. says about North Korea. I doubt it, that if an American citizen marries
a North Korean,
I doubt it that she will never get citizenship. I don't know the laws in the U.S.
Maybe in the Cold War, if you married a Russian, then
maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know. I doubt it. I doubt it, because America is very big, and they're not worried from the demographics, and they are worried from the fact that you are holding an American citizenship does not mean that the Homeland Security office of the Department of the U.S. government is not worried about you. They have a lot of American citizenships that they are worried with. In Israel, the Israeli citizenship usually does mean, even in a statistical kind of way, that you're safe.
We're always a loophole away from being a minority, basically, here.
We are a minority here.
Yeah,
when you talk about
Middle East, in the region.
In the region.
Yeah.
And the fact that in a very small portion of the area, the region, we have a majority, is something to keep.
Fragile.
It's fragile, and we have to keep it. Yes, and we have to keep it when we talk about the Palestinians, and we have to keep it when we're talking about illegal infiltrators from Sudan or Eritrea or Ethiopia or Ukraine, for that matter, because if you want Israel to continue to be the homeland of the Jewish people, you need to have people that care about Israel being the homeland of the Jewish people.
So what's the problem with legislating a law? I mean, you mentioned it before. The Supreme Court couldn't just knock it down, and why do we find ourselves in that kind of a position?
The Supreme Law sadly thinks the Supreme Court sadly think that they're the Supreme Law, and not the Knesset, and not what we legislate, and that's a big problem in Israel, from every angle you look at it. But of course, when you're talking about big policy kind of laws like the citizenship law, some might say, okay, if the Supreme Court sees a law that giving a hard time for people to work in their profession and out of negligence does not recognize this kind of license to do this or that, oh, okay, do something about it. There is a person that is hurt by the general applicable law, and they need to go to the court and get some justice. No, okay. But when you talk about major policy laws that the Knesset enact time and again, and it being cancelled or at the threat of being cancelled by the Supreme Court, you just say that Israel is not a self-governed country.
But on the other hand, I mean, the Knesset can't legislate a law tomorrow that says anybody named Yoni is going to the gallows on Tuesday, right? I mean, they can't. They can't just say anybody who is...
They won't.
Well, I'm just...
No, they can.
Theoretically...
They can, but they won't.
No, but
hold on. Theoretically, if 61 members of Knesset voted tomorrow that said anybody who wears a red shirt is going to be shot on
yes,
site.
Okay.
That's okay. That legally speaking, that's a solid.
That's
law.
That's not okay.
Yeah,
it's a very bad law.
But wouldn't that be a place where the Supreme Court should step in and say, "Hey, wait a second, this is..."
The first answer is no. The second answer is, if you ever get to a situation like that, the court will be the first one to be shot. That's the second option. If we'll ever reach a situation that the majority in the Knesset hates people with red shirts so much that they want to shoot them at sight, and the Supreme Court will try to prevent it, so we'll shoot the Supreme Court first. So it won't be a problem for the majority, to this vicious imaginary majority to do so, the fact that there is a court. That's second answer. And the third answer is, it's more likely that it will be the other way around. It's more likely that the Supreme Court will make a decision that the meaning of this decision is to shoot people with red shirts than the court, the Knesset.
But this is all theoretical. And what I'm saying
so if it's all theoretical,
what I'm saying is,
why are you tying my hands today in a very non-theoretical
but it's not
kind of way? No.
Because today we do have something on the table, which is, I mean, the claim of this citizenship law is that there are people that have the right to marry whoever they want, right?
No.
Citizens have a right to marry whoever you want.
No, that's not the premise of the law.
That's not?
If I want to marry a Palestinian Arab,
you can't.
If an Arab wants to marry a Palestinian Arab, he can. I can and he can.
Yeah.
But we just can't bring our new spouse to Israel.
That's what I'm saying, that in a civil society that has individual civil liberties, you would imagine that someone could marry whoever their heart desires.
They can marry whoever their heart desires.
Yeah.
It just doesn't mean that they can live in Israel or bring their spouse to Israel or give them citizenship. There is no right for family reunification. It's not such kind of a right. And a country can definitely say, as we said before, if you want to marry a person from North Korea, we respect your love life.
Go to North Korea.
Go to North Korea or to any other country or accept North Koreans. I don't let North Koreans in. And it's a legitimate act of state to say, I don't want North Koreans in my country. Doesn't matter. You want to marry. We respect your... go. Do whatever you want. If we're not discriminating between our citizens, no problem. And if you are even the discrimination between our own citizens can be justified in certain ways.
How so?
Of course, there is a discrimination in Israel. A Muslim is supposed to get married according to Muslim law, and the Jew according to Jewish law, and a Christian according to Christian law. There is a discrimination. I cannot get married in Israel using Christian law because I'm a Jew.
Why go so far? Only Jews get the right of return in Israel.
That's not a discrimination between citizenship. Because we're all citizens. It's who gets in. That's a very big difference. But I'm talking even citizens of Israel. If I want to get married in a church, I can't. The law does not allow it.
It goes back to what you were saying before. If we are ever in a situation where so many Jews would want to marry so many Muslims, then nothing would save us anyway. You get what I'm saying? Like, why do we need to have laws in place to dictate these things and limit people's liberties?
We don't limit. This law does not limit people's liberties.
If millions of Jews wanted to marry millions of Arabs, then no one would care about the Jewish state, and the Jewish state would cease to exist.
So then we'll talk about the law, but that's not the situation. We do care about the Jewish state.
I know. So
that's why we need to
why
have
do
this
we
law.
need to limit people's liberties in order to maintain that? And then I'm wondering, why is it that
I don't understand the question. There are people in Israel who don't care about Israel being the Jewish state. And they will marry
whoever they want,
and they will bring them in, and they will change the state of Israel. That's why we need a law to prevent that.
But I'm saying, isn't that problematic that the Supreme Court steps in and limits someone's ability to pursue a life with whoever they please?
It's not the Supreme
Court.
Sorry,
it's the law.
The law.
But the law does not limit.
Wouldn't that be a place where the Supreme Court should step in and say, you can live with whoever you want?
I say you can live with whoever. You don't need the Supreme Court. Live with whoever you want, but
just not in the state of Israel.
We as a country have the sovereignty to say who gets our citizenship.
But what happens?
The minimal aspect of sovereignty is to decide who gets your citizenship. If you can't do that and you let that to the court, you lost all sovereignty.
But the problem is, back to Eitan's original point, I think, parliaments in the past, parliaments sometimes can take themselves powers from citizens and never return those powers.
And courts?
Okay. But
not okay.
That's why. But look, in Germany, it wasn't the court that took the power.
Yes, it was.
The court took the power.
Of course, way before the parliament did not take the problem with if we want to really to talk about Germany, and of course you lost, if you know.
When I brought you here, I lost automatically.
Godwin Law, you lost. You mentioned Germany and the Holocaust and Hitler, but if you want to talk about this example, it's I think the exactly perfect example.
Okay.
The rise to power by the Nazi party started when the parliament gave away its powers, did not take powers, gave away its powers. So that's a very important
to the government, not to the judges, to the government.
To the government.
Yes. Okay.
So situations at the parliament.
But there was a majority for that in the parliament.
Let's talk about that in a second. But parliaments taking power, it's not the case in Germany. It's parliament giving up on their powers. It's the case for Germany. So the lesson, if you want to take a lesson, and I as a parliament member want to take a lesson, never give away power to anyone, not to the government and not to the judiciary. But that's one step. Second step is the parliament that did that was not elected democratically, unless, and that's a very strange definition of democratic elections for me, that you kill all your opponents using militia. If I would kill everyone else in the Knesset and I will remain the only Knesset member, I wouldn't be able to say that I was elected democratically. That was the case in Germany. If you were trying to run to office against a member of the Nazi party, you were likely, your life expectancy would not be so great. And this problem came directly from the courts, because the punishment in pre-Nazi Germany for killing a left-wing person or either right-wing person or Nazi person, and the Nazis were not exactly right-wing, but if you killed someone from the left, you would get very few, very low sentence. You wouldn't get a lot of time in jail.
Mm-hmm.
We know that because we know the crimes that Hitler himself was indicted for and prosecuted for. And he spent 9 months in a very open prison, used the time to write his own book. So it was, but if you killed someone from the other side, it would be a very severe punishment. And the reason for that was the courts, because the courts were very, very
forgiving and
anti. And I'm not judging the courts there. They were very anti-communist.
Mm-hmm.
And when you know what happened in the communist country, who can blame them? They were very, very anti-communist.
Yeah.
And that's why they were very forgiving. They were very forgiving for anyone who opposed the Communist Party.
But
so if we want to take the historic
so let's go with this example. And just 2 years ago, we saw that the Israeli parliament gave power to the government in the big Corona law.
Nah.
Why not? Why not?
I think it's the one word that I think it's the best example of how important is PR. Anyone who works in PR and listens to this podcast, you're in the right profession, but you need to help a little bit the government of the state of Israel.
Oh no.
Because the right name for this law, the name of the law in Hebrew is Chok HaSamchuyot.
Mm-hmm.
The actual name that would reflect what it is for a fact would be Chok Hagbalat HaSamchuyot, the limit of powers for the government. Because in Israel, without this law, the government basically has all the powers you can imagine to take care of a new epidemic.
Because of a law from the year 45 from a dictatorship, basically, the mandatory.
No, a lot of other countries has the same laws, because when there is a pandemic, you need a strong government. Even if you are the most libertarian kind of guy you can imagine.
Mind your words, okay.
Even if you are the most libertarian person that logically possible.
Yes.
You think that there is a need for a country, otherwise you are anarchist, but you think there is a need for government. And when you ask yourself, what do we need the government for? It's for security during war and for dealing with pandemics, because it's the major two issues. And when you learn political science, that's the two examples where a person cannot take care of himself, because every person taking care of himself when there is a war and when there is a pandemic, meaning you lose. That's the most thin kind of
consensus,
most thin government you can imagine should have the power to deal with security threats and with pandemic threats. And all countries,
Eitan is
Just
triggered.
when I thought I was out,
and
they
all
pulled me back
countries
in.
in the world, all countries in the world have the same authorities. Some they use them differently, but they have the same powers.
Except for the United States of
No.
America.
No. In the United States of America,
You have a constitution. You cannot.
yes, they can. But they can, and they do.
The Supreme Court
They
just
can and
knocked
they do.
down the,
No,
the
but
mask
it's-
mandate
Yeah,
in
but
New York.
because they said it's not for the federal government, it's for every state for itself.
But the state Supreme Court knocked down the mask mandate in New York.
Okay, but it is but reason of there is no authority or other
Yeah,
reasons.
You can't
Unconstitutional.
mandate people to wear masks in public spaces.
The question is, either is it because there is no authority or because there is a law that does not allow for that, or because there is not enough legislation. The question is, if there was a proper legislation to do so, or if it was coming from the federal, or maybe it's not based on.
No, in New York, I don't think it was coming from the federal
Maybe
court.
it's not. Maybe it's not because I didn't read this verdict. Maybe it's not because it has no rational basis. And when you hurt constitutional rights, you need to have rational basis to every actions that you do, according to the constitutions of the states of the U.S. But that does not mean that when it does help, you don't have the power. I think, for example, today, applying Green Pass in Israel is unconstitutional.
Any day.
No, not any day. Because during the Delta wave, it was constitutional.
How is it constitutional
Because-
to segregate citizens based
Bec-
on
it-
their medical decisions,
Because-
based on whether or not they want to inject a substance into their body? A substance that, mind you, is purely experimental.
Because according to...
I'm saying this all, by the way, it needs to be premised with the fact that I got vaccinated 3 times. But still, the
I
vaccine is
will-
an experiment.
Okay, but the experiment shows that if you participated in the experiment, you are much less likely.
So far.
No, in the Delta wave, not in the
the
Omicron
Delta- in
wave.
the
No,
Delta-
I'm saying in
in
the
the Delta
short
wave.
term, you are safer.
so-
But who knows what the effects are
Who
for the
knows?
long term?
I don't need to know. I do know that if you are with me in
In home, in our home,
Not
of
home.
the country, yeah,
Not
in the
home.
space,
in the movie theater,
yeah.
if you are with me in the movie theater and you did not get vaccinated during the Delta wave, I am more likely to be affected by you.
First of all, you're not sure that that's
No,
true.
on the Delta waves, there were very clear data showing that.
No, you don't know. You
no,
don't
I do know. I do know.
Nobody knew.
No.
Nobody knew exactly
and the
in
Delta-
which cases transmission is higher likelihood. At the beginning, they thought if you were outside at a beach in a crowded area, then you would be.
Of course,
But no one knew. No one knew.
First,
So why?
just
in
a
the,
second.
Yeah.
A second.
Yeah.
The fact that you don't know.
means you shouldn't limit people's liberties.
No.
The opposite.
No. But the question is, when there is a doubt,
Yeah.
which kind of risks you want to take? There is a risk in doing, and there is a risk in not doing. And who calls the shot? Who calls the shots? Which risks we want to take and which risk we don't want to take? So you say every person for himself, and I said in the beginning that during a pandemic, that everyone for himself is good for you. Also during a war, you can say, who said that Lebanon threatened us? Maybe Lebanon is not threatening us. We're just during the 6-day war, we attacked in Egypt before they attacked us. Who said they will attack? So how can I draft people for the 6-day war when there is a doubt? If there is a doubt, you can't take people liberties. No, most countries, not most, all countries in the world does not work according to this premise. Now you can say, okay, but I'm the crazy libertarian that wants the imagine.
I'm not a libertarian.
That they I'm not talking about you. I'm talking about the hypothetical
I'm
person.
crazy, but I'm not a libertarian.
I'm talking about the hypothetical person who make this claim that you should take the risk of the Egyptians attacking the state of Israel and slaughtering each and every one of us because you're not sure for certain that there will be an attack, and don't draft people, and don't use the public money for attack, and don't do anything because there is a doubt. There is a doubt. Don't hurt people's liberties. So I can't draft people.
No, I think the comparison is flawed. First of all, I'm not so sure that would be a crazy, absurd claim to claim that even
show me
that
one
should be-
country that
But-
works like that, and then we will talk.
But the comparison is flawed. I mean, you can't compare a virus
To a war?
to a
course I
war,
can.
to a group of people, to
Of
an army
course
with
I
a
can.
will. The virus is a virus.
It's nature. It's a nature. It's like a
So-
tsunami.
Okay, and
It has no free will.
So if there is a wave of tsunami
Yes.
coming towards Israel,
Yes.
and we don't know yet if it will hit the shore or not. We don't know yet, and we want to evacuate everyone by force.
Why?
Why?
What if I want to die in a tsunami?
So go die, but if you
why
but-
is that? I don't understand
but-
how.
I want
But-
you to die in tsunami.
but some people might
not want me to
choose-
die.
No, if you want to die, first of all, there is a law in Israel permitting
But
suicide.
when there's a
but-
tsunami, you don't know it's coming. It's just coming, and I cannot rely.
No, but if I know that there is a tsunami
But
wave,
you don't know.
No, I sometimes
That's
know. I see there was an earthquake in.
You have 2 minutes.
Okay, 3 minutes.
3 minutes.
2 hours, doesn't matter. There was a tsunami now that people know for 4 hours before it came in the Pacific.
It's like you said about the red shirts. I
Just
mean,
a
if
second.
someone doesn't want
Just
to
a
evacuate,
second.
what are you going to call in the whole army and they're all going to die trying to evacuate this guy?
I don't have time to argue when I have
Yeah.
No, when I have an hour before a
Yeah.
tsunami hits my shore.
Yeah.
I don't have time to argue. I don't have time to explain, and I don't have time to.
But what are we arguing about?
I say evacuate because I can't accept X amount of people injured in my hospitals because my hospital system will collapse. I can't have X amount of people dead because the costs to the state will be very high. And I can't have people that are not really understands the danger or never heard about the danger, so they don't believe to what I see as a 80% chance, and they don't know. And so I need, as a state, to evacuate the shore.
So let's go to the law because you're
Evacuate the
comparing a
shore.
tsunami to a.
Wait, but
let's go to the law because right today the law allows the state of Israel to take certain powers in case of a pandemic, in case of
that
an
was
infectious.
before the law that passed 2
let's
years
talk
ago.
about the original
in case of an No, but I want to talk about the law that's passed today.
So the law that passed not today, to a week ago,
Because
but it's the same
you
law.
as a lawyer know, right, that when you pass a certain law, there's precedent, right? I mean, it sets a certain thing in stone. It
Again,
becomes an accepted
what the
norm.
government, according to Israeli law,
Yeah.
during a time of emergency.
So I want
Which-
to know what
just a
constitutes
second.
an emergency.
During the time of emergency, without the law, if we never had a law in the Knesset, during a time of emergency, basically, there is no limit to what the government can do.
That was our state until 2020.
It was-
until January
It
2020.
was our situation until 2020, and it's still the case, by the way. It's still the case.
Yeah.
But, so basically, the government had an open check. You can do whatever you want. You can vaccine people, mandatory. You can quarantine people by decision of anyone.
You can execute people.
Basically, you can almost execute people. Almost. I think that one thing that you might not be able to do, but you can do basically whatever you want.
Might not is not so comforting. That's not what you want to hear from your elected representative.
No,
you can execute. I'm not sure about
I need
that.
to get back to you on
That
that
was the case. Let me get back to you on that. But that was
Can we execute people?
that was the case until the Knesset passed the law.
Okay.
Yeah.
And now?
Now there are limits to the measures that can be taken. There are measures to what kind of parliamentarian oversight there is. Some beforehand, some after, but it's all mandatory. You must go through the Knesset.
But does it just categorize an emergency in case of disease, but in all other emergencies the government can still take?
Yes.
So in other emergencies the government can still take whatever powers it wants?
And you want this.
Okay.
You want this.
But I'm just trying to understand what the law is doing.
No, the law says
Israel is an emergency state since its establishment.
Of course. But
people don't know that.
Just a second. We're in an emergency state all the time.
Yeah.
And we are. That's the case. But that's a fact. That's not something that we are. There are no a lot. There you can.
I don't feel like I'm in an emergency.
Baruch Hashem, because you live in denial. But
what?
But
I'm just not in an emergency.
Of course you are.
But then the United States is in an emergency.
How many people in the United States?
Yeah.
There is ever percentage experienced azaka, alarm, siren, and they have to go and hide and they have in their home a designated area by law that they need to live there or be there during an alarm, and they're making those drills to each and every school, each and every year, few times, and they use these drills. It's not just to make a check mark. They use these drills. In the last year,
I went to school.
In the last year, the capital of the state of Israel got missiles. How many countries in the free world can say they got missiles in the last year?
Well, a couple, but not the United States. Not the United States.
Which one?
But
which one? Which one in Europe?
In the
Ukraine.
last year.
Which one in Europe?
Ukraine.
Okay. Which one in EU?
Yeah, not many. I'm with you on that, but
okay.
I don't
in
accept the definition of emergency.
So I don't.
When I was a kid,
for me, that's an emergency.
When I was a kid, I
Missile
grew up in the.
on your home, it's not an emergency.
I mean,
for me, it's an emergency.
If there's
for
a
me,
missile,
it's an emergency. So, how many countries in the world? How many countries in the world has?
But that you're saying the last year, the emergency was in May.
Okay.
So it's still an emergency?
No, we are again.
How long does the missile take to get here?
No, I don't understand what you're saying.
I mean, the emergency's over. Listen, when I was a kid, I grew up in the South, in Alabama, in the heart of Dixie. There were a lot of tornadoes. Every year we would do every year during tornado season, we would do like a couple of tornado drills, and they would take all the kids into the hallway.
And during a tornado, if you go outside,
during a tornado,
just a second, if you're during a tornado, if you're going outside, what does the police tell you?
They're like, I don't
go
know who
back
this
in,
crazy
you crazy
guy
person.
Is. Yeah.
If not, if you don't go in now, we will arrest you.
But they're yelling out there.
We will arrest you.
I'm not sure.
Usually, yes, because you can't go. You can't be outside now, ma'am. You can't be outside. Yeah, there is a tornado. Again. You can't be outside, ma'am. That's what you see in the movies during a tornado.
In the movies.
I don't know. I never lived in Alabama, but during a tornado, you are in emergency. In Israel, every citizen is within 1 minute of a missile,
of death,
of a missile, and experience it a few times during. Now, Israel is a country. In Tel Aviv, you can say, "Oh, it was in May."
Yeah, in Sderot, it
can happen,
a different story.
And it's 20 minutes. We are as a country.
But Simcha,
in the U.S. there is no part of the U.S.
I just want to
no
say
part of the U.S. is under a constant threat of missiles.
Why? North Korea is now developing ballistic missiles that can, and Russia.
China.
But anyway, what I'm saying is, under that logic, it's always an emergency. So the government always has the power to basically usurp the rights of individuals, take their liberties away, strip them of their liberties.
Yes.
So that is totally antithetical to conservatism, to liberalism.
It's true, but it's true.
Whoa! Let's stop here.
What you said, it's true, but
okay.
But the fact that we were able to have a government that does not do it all the time, even though it can.
How grateful we should be.
But you as
Just a second. I don't like the cynical. No,
cynical.
No.
Nice is just a euphemism for cynical, by the way.
No.
The two nice Jewish boys.
I don't like the cynical tone because you can joke about it.
Yeah.
But people, I don't know which country most people watch your podcast.
The US.
But if it's US, in the US they would say, don't judge me, right? Don't judge me because I need to protect. How many people there are certain cities in the US that people might experience that. But when I drove home last night
To Lod.
to Lod, to my home, new home in Lod, with my 3 young children, I heard a machine gun 20 meters away from me by Arab that can face this to my children tomorrow morning, and he did it in May. We live in a threat. The fact that we will joke about it will not make it less of a threat. So the question is, how can a country, a democracy, survive in a state of emergency? It's a big question. But the fact that it's a question does not mean that we are not in emergency.
We're all in emergency.
No, we are not.
In Chicago, they have like 1,000 murders a year.
No, we are not all.
Chicago is more dangerous than Lod, I guarantee you.
So
by rate of homicides.
But the pizza is better.
Yeah. But Chicago, that's true. Deep dish is really good.
But Chicago there are certain neighborhoods it is, but we're not talking now about a special area. We're talking about a country. The U.S. never, I think the last time the U.S. faced an imminent threat to its own existence was 50 years ago, maybe, when in Cuba, in the Bay of Pigs in Cuba. That was the last time. The last time Israel faced an imminent threat for its existence
was
1
minute ago.
Last May, and last May that we know of. The amount of dangers that we don't know of, and every day is being. But there are no other countries in that way. So the fact that you can joke about it in Tel Aviv is just showing that we, as a country, were able to keep democracy, free speech, normal way of life, and all in all, normal kind of life in a non-normal situation.
But you speak about these basic civil liberties like free speech as if there's something granted to me by the overlords that are keeping me safe from the imminent threat that was out in the outside. I served 3 years in a combat unit.
Yeah.
I am the person protecting myself from the outside.
You're not the person. You're a part of a country that does that. Exactly. But when the U.S. faced so much less threat to its citizens, the actions that the U.S. did were much worse to civil liberties than the state of Israel does to its own citizens. So you can say, oh, how happy should we be? Yeah, we should be happy that although we are in the most dangerous neighborhood in the world, and we're facing the most imminent threats in the world, we are able to live in a somewhat democratic and free country.
Somewhat
don't take it for granted, because no other country ever did that.
I feel there's a generational gap here.
We're the same generation.
Hey, man, that's not nice. I'm not that old. I'm not that old.
No, but I feel like you're contradicting yourself, because on one hand you say, I, as the parliament, need to preserve as much power as possible in the parliament, right? And on the other hand, you praise the fact that the government holds.
I don't praise it.
You don't praise it, but what's the word? I don't know. But you're not very anti that fact that they have those powers to protect us. And to me, it's contradicting.
So I explained to you why it's not contradicting. We need to exercise the powers of the parliament. we can't exercise the powers of the parliament if we are not alive. Now you say try to find the sweet spot. We need to find a sweet spot between normal way of life and defending our own existence.
What happened if tomorrow all emergency laws were?
We can't have the army. Our army is based on the fact that we are in an emergency state, because according to international conventions that Israel is obligated to, you cannot have compulsory draft, not more than a certain amounts of time that we pass that, if you're not in a state of emergency.
But the ranks of the army, that's a good point.
Just a second. So that's one example. Another example is you don't have ways to deal with terrorists. The law that allows us to demolish house of a terrorist is based on the existence of a state of an emergency.
You could legislate a law without an emergency just says.
And then we will be a country that thinks that when there is no emergency, you can demolish a person's house because he made a crime. That's not very democratic to me, right? But
he's not a citizen. What do I care?
And if he is, by the way, the law allows also for a citizen.
Okay.
But the fact that you have a war, a civil war, during the time the time Israel has more constitutional safeguards than the US had during the Civil War. We are in a civil war. Some parts of our population wants to kill us.
Mm-hmm.
We keep this civil war
Civil.
But it's still a war. And we need to face this fact. We need to face it. We can't
ignore it. But in the US, they fought, they finished the war, and then everybody got...
Okay, so there was...
The South will rise again. They say stuff like that.
So there was a sketch in Eretz Nehederet saying that what we need. Okay, do a civil war and let's finish with it. But I don't think people really want it. And I definitely don't want it. And it's definitely keeps us with less casualties and more economical growth.
You don't want the
civil war,
inner conflict to find one way or another its end?
Which is the one and which is the another?
The one is...
That's a very important question.
The one is, I'll play in the devil's advocate
one way
here.
or another. Either
you win, either you lose. No, I don't want it to play one way or I want to
roll
win.
the dice.
I don't want one way or another. I want to win, and I want to win without a lot of casualties to my side. Okay. And you know what? Without even a lot of casualties to the other side. I want to win by showing strength. And you can win. And definitely the problem today is not that we are not winning. The problem today is yet we are not fighting at all. Not in a civil way, not in a non-civil way. It's just a one-way war.
What would you have done in May if you were prime minister?
For example, in May, when there was anti-Semitic pogroms, no other way to describe what happened in Lod, in Akko, and in the roads of the Negev, in the Galil, there were people had very sad reminder that we are in a war, and I would treat it as a war, like they treated it in 2000, and they finished with it in one day. There were 15, 16, maybe 30 casualties that to finish the war. But it was finished, and people were not being slaughtered in their homes or in the streets, and people were not traumatized for years to come. We still see it in Lod and other places. There was a war, and we won. But immediately after that war in 2000, there was a committee, Vadat Or, that basically told the police, never try to win a war. It's citizens. You can't have war with your own citizens. Or you can, but it will be a one-sided war because we didn't have the police to defend us. Or it became, in some parts, the parts that it was finished in a good way, it were the part when it was actual civil war, when the citizens took it upon themselves to defend their communities.
Because they carry weapons.
Or they carried weapons, or people came from the outside to help them. And that's not something you want to see in a functioning country.
Speaking of carrying weapons, what do you think about gun rights in Israel?
I'm for it.
Everybody should own a gun if they want.
Except for Arabs.
Given. That's a given.
No, by the way, Arabs there are a lot of Arabs that carry legal weapons. I don't have a problem with it. If a person is going to the background check, I'm not a gun enthusiastic. I do think people need to have background check, and I do think that people and it could be some rules. It's not. It shouldn't be free for all, and it shouldn't be like over the counter
Prescription.
non-prescription drug. It should be. You can go background check. You can go and even demand service in the army or some kind of
prerequisite, some kind
of other demands.
Yeah.
And but I do think that the person that knows how to use a weapon should have a weapon to defend his life, his family, his neighborhood with.
Did the May events have any influence on that opinion? Were you of a different opinion
I
before?
thought about it before, but it's not really. It's not. Before I was in Lod, I lived in Judea and Samaria, in an outpost in Judea and Samaria. Everyone either carry a gun or have a gun they got from the army to defend the place, or so it's not very. It wasn't
foreign to you, yeah.
Yeah, it
So
wasn't
you were
foreign
an
for me.
occupier in the territories, now you are an occupier in Lod, basically.
We are all occupiers, and I'm very proud occupier of the land of Israel. This is we are the nation of Israel. Then the Israeli. We came back to our homeland, and it's very good for us to occupy the land.
Born to occupy. We should get hats.
We're
Born to occupy.
Yeah.
I would buy one of those.
Occupy the land of Israel. We are the 99% of.
Yeah.
the
It's
land of
funny. I
Israel.
have to say, I think it's this is probably one of the more fiery debates we've had in a while, and it's with someone that's kind of ideologically on the. I mean, not all the way, because we had the discussion before the podcast, before we started recording about Haredim, but generally speaking, you're on the right side of the aisle. We are kind of on the same ideological side of the fence, and yet this was a very, fiery debate.
It's always
it's
like
good.
that. The
Because Simcha has the
debates-
heart of a leftist. That's the problem.
You're so cute. You're too cute. But no, because it's boring to have an argument with people that does not share the same
Right. Common
premise,
ground.
premise with you.
Where there's no basis.
There is no shared basis. So what can you argue? You can
Yeah.
talk about the weather.
And it's boring to agree with people. So all you're left to do is argue. I think that's the basis of the Jewish soul.
MK Simcha Rothman, what minister would you, or what's your dream career speaking? What would you like to really do?
If I was
Minister of Judiciary?
If I can choose now, every position, if there was a right-wing coalition today, and we didn't have this terrible government with terror-supporting parties, and I could get any jobs that I want, I wouldn't want to be a minister. I would want to be the chairman of the Constitution Committee in the Knesset. I think that maybe this answer will change after a few years, but I don't think that this new idea in Israeli politics that it's either a minister or nothing, I don't think it's true. I think the parliament has a lot to do. I think we do a lot in the Constitution Committee, which I'm not a member because we're boycotting the committees.
Yeah, you are a member in the committee to select judges.
Yeah, but that's not a Knesset committee.
Yeah.
I'm not a member in any Knesset committee, but I do sit regularly in the Constitution Committee, and I think I have a lot of influence there. I think in the law that we talked about, the fact that it's very clear in the new law that you can only use the green pass to prevent people from getting sick and not to segregate people to make them into getting vaccines. It's something in the new law. It wasn't in the old law, and we put it in. So you can argue and say, no, any use for that, it's a problem, but I don't accept it.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a legitimate way to prevent people from getting sick. It's not a legitimate way to make people get vaccines, and it's not the same. And other issues, getting outside from the house for prayer, even during lockdowns, and all kind of changes I did put in the law. Even I don't have any vote in the committee. I just convinced people to do the right thing, I think. And I think there is a lot to do in the parliament. And I think there are too many ministers, of course.
But it would be sweet to be the Minister of Justice.
Again, if you let me choose,
nice.
I will choose the committee any day over a minister. Maybe after a few years, when I'll had enough, when I've had
when you
enough.
canceled all emergency laws.
We will yet convince you next time. You're
No,
on the
I
podcast.
do think it's a good. Things that needs to be done.
At least talked about.
And we are talking about it, but I think it might be a little bit easier not to cancel the state of emergency laws, to cancel the state of emergency.
Mm-hmm.
It might be a little bit easier. Just win the war.
Mm-hmm.
Amen.
Thank
Amen
you
to
so
that.
much for coming. It was fascinating.
Very interesting.
Before we go, we are sponsored by AJN, the Australian Jewish News. Check them out at ajn.timesofisrael.com. We also accept donations, so please go to tunjabi.com/donate and help us out. Also, we're sponsored by Matza Israel.
Ooh, wow.
Simcha.
Yes.
We help people.
Go Masa.
Yes, we
Yeah.
love Matza Israel.
Yeah.
Go to matzaisrael.org, check them out, and that is it. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Bye,
Bye,
guys.
guys.